welcome to the Whitman Freedom Team program for the month of June here. And I'm Mike Kryzanek, who's involved with Tom Evans, who will be speaking to you in a couple of minutes with our special guest. As always, we try to look at topics that are pertinent to life here in Whitman, and also issues that are in many respects controversial but important as part of our objective as members of the Whitman Freedom Team. So in order to move forward with our program tonight, which is on anti-Semitism, we'll get to Tom, and Tom can introduce our special guest. Tom?
Thanks, Michael. Good evening, or good afternoon, whatever the case is when you're viewing this. Today we have a special guest, and our guest today is Julia Sheehan. Julia is a Whitman resident. She teaches in East Bridgewater at the high school level. She's been active in her community and in East Bridgewater and in several other groups. Can you tell us a few things about yourself?
Absolutely. I grew up in Stoughton, Massachusetts, and I have been here in Whitman for almost 20 years. I teach in East Bridgewater, high school history.
Nice. When you were in East Bridgewater, when you were in Stoughton, did you attend Stoughton High School?
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
And were you involved in anything like a club or anything like that? Debate or anything like that?
I did. I was involved in the Mock Senate. I was involved in the Gay Straight Alliance. I think peer leadership.
Yeah.
A lot of clubs like that.
Yeah, you've continued to do that.
Busy, right?
Yeah.
Always busy.
Yeah. How about college? What college or university did you attend?
I went to Boston College.
BC?
Yes.
Yep. Tell us a little about that, your major and your experience there, live on campus.
I did. I lived on campus. I majored in history and secondary education. I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. I was always in love with history. So I went there and really had a great experience there. I joined the Hillel there, which is like the Jewish community on campus, and attended events there. Had just a wonderful time.
Tell us a little bit about that group. I don't know anything about it.
Okay, so it is, and it's across college campuses. It's not particular to BC, but it's a Jewish community on college campuses, and you'll get together and hold Shabbat services. You'll have dinners. You'll attend temple together sometimes. Just different kind of activities like that. It's a way to kind of bring the Jewish community together on a campus, especially on a campus like BC, which is a Catholic college.
Yeah.
It was funny. I actually was deciding between Brandeis and BC, and ended up at BC.
Yeah.
So.
I was going to ask you, Boston College is Catholic, so did you feel you fit in there? Did it work out all right for you?
Yeah, and I think that I'm a fairly secular Jew. My mother grew up in a very Jewish household, and she was much more of an agnostic, maybe even an atheist by the end of her life. And so I grew up in much less of a Jewish household than she did. And so it's like an important part of my identity, but it wasn't something that I felt I needed to go to somewhere more like Brandeis.
Yeah.
So in a lot of other ways, BC really fit kind of what I wanted for a major and the campus and all of that. And so that was important.
Has your Jewishness changed over time, if that's the proper word to use?
Yeah, I think that it has. I think that maybe in my kind of college years, I was a little bit less connected to it. I went on a Birthright Israel trip in my 20s, and I think that helped me kind of reconnect in some ways. And then once I had kids and I really wanted to make sure I passed my heritage on to my kids, I think that I reconnected with a lot of my Judaism, and we do a lot of practices in my home that reflect that I think maybe I wasn't doing in my 20s, and is having kids. But I think that's a familiar story to a lot of people, is that you kind of connect with your heritage in order to pass it on to your children.
Have you ever been to Israel?
I have, yes.
So that was part of that trip, right?
Yeah. So the Birthright Israel trip is this fantastic trip that will take any Jewish person, a person of Jewish heritage, to Israel. You tour the country, you kind of learn about the heritage, about connections, about different things going on in different cities. So it was really a wonderful trip. I believe they take people from 18 to 26. So I went in my mid-20s, and it's a really wonderful tour.
And this is for how? I mean, weeks?
10 days.
10 days.
10 days.
Okay.
I'm sure there's other things you could do, but this
Yeah.
was a 10-day trip. Yeah.
Our granddaughter is Jewish, and she did the same thing, and she raved about it.
Yes.
And she said the connections she made there will be lifetime. And when she got back on the campus, she was able to really explain to the younger people how important it was. So it's almost like you're recruiting,
Yeah.
because everybody's, and I think it was free, wasn't it? Or was
It is.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's free.
it's free.
That was
Yeah.
really another attraction. But
That's
she
nice.
said she felt so good about the whole experience.
So she made lifelong friends, too. I
She
think.
did, yeah.
Oh yeah, I still talk to a few people from the trip.
Yeah.
So it was wonderful.
Can you tell a little bit about your family when they were growing up? Maybe it's a little bit different when your mom was growing up or your dad, and what kind of formed their thoughts and their values along the way.
Yeah, and so I actually think I was saying before that my mother grew up in a very Jewish household. She grew up in Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh, and it was a very Jewish household, and she experienced a lot of anti-Semitism. She was born in the mid-50s, and I always remember hearing stories about there being a very small number of Jewish families in town. They were very tightly knit because they really felt like they only had each other. I remember stories about people throwing things at their house, and my grandmother telling my mother and her brothers to go out and clean it up and stand tall and be proud, and just having experienced that, I think something about like tomatoes at the garage, and it was about their Judaism. And then my mother, I mentioned that I felt like she became maybe an agnostic as she got older. She told me once that she would go to her friends' houses who were not Jewish in town, and the family would be saying all these anti-Semitic things, and then they would look at her and kind of remember, oh, but not you, you're a good Jew.
Oh, yeah.
And then she would go home, and her mother would do something very similar and say, oh, what did they feed you at the Goyam's house? Like, you eat there for dinner, you'll have soup for dinner. She had this whole disparaging thing on her end.
Yeah.
And so my mother, from a very young age, decided that they were all crazy, and she didn't want to be a very strong part of any sort of religious group. But I think that those experiences really shaped the way she viewed things. And she was not, that's not to say that she hid or turned away from her Judaism. I think that she just, like I said, became agnostic in a lot of ways.
You mentioned Pittsburgh. There was that shooting where a number of people in the synagogue
the Squirrel
were
Hill.
killed.
Yes.
Was
yes.
that in the general neighborhood, or?
I believe that's where her grandparents lived. So my mother actually grew up in Aliquippa, which is like a small town. It's where Ty Law, the Patriots player, where he's from. But I believe Squirrel Hill is where my grandparents lived. So my mother may have had a connection there, but that's not where she lived.
Yeah. Excuse me, go ahead.
So there continues to be, I presume, not necessarily you personally, but concern about safety issues and
Absolutely.
threats. I'm not saying you, but I mean just in general. If I were a Jewish person, I think I would probably be concerned these days in the atmosphere we live in.
There is a lot of concern, and it's growing. It's interesting. I heard those stories from my mom about her growing up in the 50s and 60s, and I remember when I was in school, maybe the 90s, I'm thinking, this is in the past. And I remember it always shocked me, because that's so close after the Holocaust. How can people not recognize that it's not okay to be this hateful? But I still always thought, that's in the past. That's not something that happens anymore. And then as I got older and started to experience some things, we were members of the JCC, the Jewish Community Center in Stoughton. And someone graffitied it with swastikas. And that was a scary event, just that people would be that hateful and decide to do that. But I remember after that, the community came out and helped repaint, and that was nice to see the support in the face of such a hateful incident. But that happened, and that kind of started to shatter my idea of like, oh, that's all in the past, the hate's gone. At one point, I think I might have been in 6th or 7th grade, someone in Stoughton published the White Patriot Ledger. And I remember not really understanding what that was, but they published it and they threw it on the yards of my family and a couple other families in our neighborhood. I don't know if it was everyone or if it was targeted at people, but I remember my mom picking that up and and being very angry and calling the police and reporting it, and just barely kind of understanding what that was all about, and understanding that
Well,
it was
Stoughton
hateful.
has a synagogue, does it not?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Did they sell that to the Y, though?
The JCC?
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
I
they
was very
did.
upset with that.
Yeah. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Michael.
I was already, I think I was already living here by that point. I was certainly no longer living at home.
Yeah.
No, the reason I asked is that there's no longer a synagogue in Brockton,
No.
but I think it moved, the Jewish community moved to Stoughton and
Canton.
Sharon and
Canton.
and those areas.
And Sharon was always a really big Jewish community, so there was always a lot of temples there. We attended temple in Canton. So I don't know why we didn't go to the one in Stoughton, but there always was one, and I always had Jewish classmates. So there was a small Jewish community, but I can remember going to Hebrew school after elementary school and carpooling with other kids from my elementary school. So there was a small Jewish community there.
Have you gone through the bat mitzvah?
I have not.
You have
No.
not, okay.
I didn't last that
I'm
long.
not trying to put you on the
No, that's okay. Yeah.
You know, one of the things I've heard of, I think I've heard or have discussed is there are groups of people, for example, gay, lesbians, etc., who remained silent for years and years and years and lived with what they really felt they were, for fear of being found out and then being discriminated against. Did you ever have that feeling of being in a group and say, you know, I don't want them to know that I'm Jewish? Did you ever have that feeling? Or
I haven't myself personally, but I could see why people feel that way. And I think it's scary. You know, I personally think that I want people to know I'm Jewish. I'm proud of my heritage. That's not something that I've ever been in a situation where I felt like, oh, this is about to get dangerous. I don't want someone to know who I am. But I do have friends who have felt that way, and it was kind of surprising to me. You know, I was saying before that I kind of went through this journey of sort of realizing that hate did still exist at some point in my childhood. And I've seen that grow and grow, and I actually went to an event with the ADL last year with some friends, and one of them was telling me that she is afraid at times, and that she was, and this brings something else into the conversation there, but she was telling me about the idea of Israel existing is so important to her because she feels like if anti-Semitism ever gets so bad here that she feels unsafe, she has somewhere to go, which that was a shocking idea to me personally. That you would need to have an escape route. And this was a couple years ago. And I've only seen the anti-Semitism grow since then, and that's a scary thing. I also have attended different rallies against anti-Semitism, and heard some college students talking about their experiences in the last couple of years, and talking about how people would leave hateful messages on the whiteboards outside their dorm rooms, or if they had any outward appearance of their Judaism or were attending temple or whatever it may be, that
Sure.
They would get nasty comments, that people would speak out against them. And one of the things about that is so upsetting for me is listening to people conflate kind of some of the issues that are going on today in Israel and Palestine with just Judaism in general. And so people might conflate Judaism with Zionism, with support for Israel. And that's an upsetting thing because there are relationships between those things, but it's complicated. And just because someone is Jewish doesn't mean that they support the Netanyahu government. Someone may have a lot of support for Israel, the existence of Israel, and not like what that government is doing right now, which is horrific, what they are doing right now in Palestine. But that doesn't mean that the Jewish person you meet on the street had anything to do with that or supports that. And the idea that these Jewish students, just by nature of their religion, are going to be linked with that and treated poorly because of it is really upsetting.
Do you feel any obligation as a Jewish parent to inculcate your Judaism and Judaism with your children?
I definitely do Jewish practices with them. We light the candles on Friday nights.
Yeah.
We celebrate the major holidays. So we do those things. I also think that I'm a fairly secular Jew, and like whatever my children decide they want to do as they get older will be okay with me. But I want them to know about their heritage, and I want them to know about Jewish practices. So I do.
May I ask, is your children's father Jewish?
He is not. He is Catholic.
Catholic, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you?
That's how that Sheehan gets in there, right?
Yeah. They say, oh, man. One of the thoughts, the same thing with my family, that was mixed with Catholic and so forth. Christmas was observed by everybody. So was Rosh Hashanah and everything else.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, it's
We
almost
do
the
that.
same. It's the same. I think that's healthy between you and me, but somebody else might not think that.
We enjoy it. The kids have a little bit of everything. That's fun.
Get gifts, right?
Oh, they do. Oh, they love it.
Did you feel that people who had authority, whether it be a coach, a teacher, or whatever it is, somebody with authority, do you think that they were supportive if you reported something like that, or do you think it was brushed aside? Your own experience, and maybe maybe your family would be an example of that.
I've been lucky enough that I've never had an incident occur directly to me that I felt I needed to report. I do think that the people in my life when I was growing up would have been supportive. I felt like, the faculty at my school would have stepped up and done something about it had there been any reports. And I know in other cases I can kind of remember things happening to other kids at my school, and faculty was supportive in stopping that. And it can be so hard because, with kids and bullying and comments, so often it's not done right in front of the adults, and so that's always a tough piece.
Yeah.
But I do feel like they would have been.
It's funny since
I feel like in Whitman, just in East Bridgewater, there's not a large Jewish community, right? I presume you kind of, I'm not saying you stand out, but as a result of the fact that it's largely Catholic, Protestant, is that accurate? I don't know East Bridgewater as well as I do with Whitman, and I know that there's not a great deal of Jewishness in our community as well. I
think that's very true. A lot of times I will have the chance to kind of educate people about a holiday that's coming up or what happens at that holiday. And it's something that they may never have heard of before or just only have heard the very basics of it. And so I like being able to kind of tell people a little bit more about, like, well, why do we have 8 days of Hanukkah and candles, and what is Rosh Hashanah? Why do we have the apples and the honey, and just kind of what those symbols are? So, I would say that there's not a lot of other Jews in this area that I know.
You think the teacher in you comes out?
Always.
I think so. I think it is,
I like to teach.
Yeah.
Do you bring the menorah into class at all and try to explain it, or?
I don't know if I've ever brought the menorah in. When I kind of decorate my classroom, I always try to make sure that I've got something from any culture that is represented, and I bring in Jewish things as well. But any kind of culture that's represented, I try to make sure we've got in the classroom.
Since we started the Whitman Freedom Team, I think I'm more alert and have my ears open for things. I am not on Facebook, but it's come back to me from many people about some comments that people make about anybody who's successful who happens to be Jewish, and they'll use that kind of an anti-Semitic kind of a comment. But really, I don't mean it, but they do mean it, and that's hurtful. And I think the fact that things are on, the local, computers and everything else, cyber, it's silent, it's invisible, and I think it's really helpful. Any suggestion that you have for dealing with that, because it might crop up even whether it's intended for you or not. Particularly like your children may see something like that. Do you have a approach?
I always think it depends on the intent of the person to some degree. Someone who is speaking from a well-meaning place of ignorance is a little bit different to me from someone who is intending to hurt. I myself try to stay off of social media, so on social media I probably would recommend blocking and not engaging, because I feel like you're unlikely to sway people who are there purposely trying to cause trouble. But someone who makes a hurtful comment, like you're talking about, speaking about Jews who maybe have been successful and bringing stereotypes in there, that's something that I always think you need to call out, especially with someone who's well-intentioned. And it doesn't have to be mean. Sometimes we talk about calling someone in versus calling out someone and saying, that hurt me, and here's why. And I know you didn't mean it, but when you make that kind of comment, it makes me feel singled out as a Jewish person, or, kind of doing things like that. And that's something that I always try to do, even if it's uncomfortable, to call something out as gently as I can when it's a well-intentioned person, and to say something when that person is not well-intentioned too, to say, I don't appreciate you talking that way, that's a stereotype, whatever it may be, but stopping, marking the moment, letting them know that comment is not okay.
Out of bounds.
And I feel like that helps, if I'm in a group situation and I do that kind of marking the moment and saying like, whoa, stop, wait a second here. I think that gives other people who might have been a little bit uncomfortable just the opportunity to say, you're right, like, let's not go that route. And it just kind of gives everyone pause and hopefully thinks a little bit harder about whatever's going to happen next or the next time.
Julia, you teach world history. Does the Holocaust at all come into your curriculum at all?
It does, absolutely. And I really love the opportunity to teach kids about the Holocaust, especially today. I feel like we knew a lot more about it just going into school when I was a kid, and that was a long time ago now. And so you hear about things online where students are questioning whether the Holocaust is real. There's more and more Holocaust denial. And it's further and further removed from memory. So I find it's a really important unit that we do. And I have a great activity that I first got from the United States Holocaust Museum. And we build a timeline in my class, and we talk about, starting in the 1930s, we talk about the things that led to the Holocaust. There's that old saying, it never starts with concentration camps. And I think that's so important for my students to hear, like, something that you might think is just a goofy, slightly mean-spirited comment, no big deal. Well, it's not. That's where you start, and then it leads to all of these other things. So we do spend a bit of time studying the Holocaust and how these things could happen, and the roots of them, and ways that people successfully rebelled. Even in their, obviously we know the facts of the Holocaust and how big that was, and how hard rebellion was, but small ways that people were able to make a difference in that.
So is there interest among your students when you talk about those issues?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. One of the great things that the United States Holocaust Museum provided was mini bios on victims of the Holocaust. And so each student gets assigned to a biography. And so they are supposed to kind of look at the rest of the lesson through the eyes of that person and think about what they might have experienced. And that personalization, I think, goes a long way.
Yeah. My wife and I visited the Holocaust Museum in Washington, and what gets us is the shoes that are there and the suitcases.
That's the moving part.
And it's unbelievable. I mean, if that doesn't get to you and make you think about, all the efforts that were made to exterminate a whole group of people, a whole ethnic group of people, a whole religious group of people. So
I was going to say something, but I think teaching the Holocaust is imperative. What happens, as you say, as you get further away from the date that it happened, people will accept fake stories, denials, all these kinds of things, and then when something happens to that group, they won't have the support they should have, and things like the tribute in Boston too. That's a very nice situation where I think it's helped the city of Boston as well as the people in New England. It's powerful, and I think it's appropriate for today's what's happened with certain groups. There'll be nobody there for me when they take this one and that one and that one. You know it better than I do.
Oh yeah, that's such a moving poem, and I make sure to share it with the students every year, and anytime we're learning about the Holocaust. It's an important one.
Do you get into Palestine and the issues of what happened on October 7th? And
A little bit.
Yeah.
I always try to give students context for current events and to give them facts. We see so much, especially in this social media age, just snippets of information. Sometimes they're real, sometimes they're not. They might be coming from people who are experts. They might be coming from people who just have an account,
Yeah.
So I always think it's really important to give students facts and background and have them read official sources. And we do talk about the history of Palestine and Israel and the fighting that has gone on there for decades. And we do talk about the reporting coming out today of the horrific things that are happening to the people of Gaza today.
Right.
And we do look at, I certainly have looked at, what Netanyahu's government is doing today. And that, I'll just say for my own self, as a Jewish woman, I have always felt, having the Holocaust in my family's heritage, that I had a duty to stand up against hatred towards anyone and discrimination towards anyone. That, in my family past that had happened and it was so harmful, and I didn't want that to happen to anyone else going forward. And so I look at what the Netanyahu government is doing to the Gazans, and I can't believe it, and I think it's horrific. And as a Jewish woman, I want to stand up against that hate as well.
do you, I watched on some of the television shows where they've gone into the genealogy of an individual. Have you traced back?
I haven't.
Do you know where 2 or 3 generations back, or 1 generation back?
I only know, I've never done the actual DNA piece of it. I did different projects in school, especially looking back at my family history, and so I know that my great-grandfather, my mother's father's father, he escaped Russian pogroms to come to America. He came to Pennsylvania in around the turn of the century, around the 1900s, escaping the Russian pogrom. I think he was, as the story goes, I don't know all the details, but as the story goes, I believe he was the youngest son, and they raised money and they sent him here to live with a distant cousin and work on a farm and find his way in the safety here.
Yeah. Can you recommend or suggest maybe an organization in this area, or that would be a good source of information that would be that people could share with their family, or just learn about things themselves? Because I think there's a lot of information that I have no idea. I remember as a young kid using things like this. Oh yeah, you're going to Jew them down, which means to lower the price. And I didn't realize how hurtful that was. But it is. And unless you're called out on it, you don't know. And if everybody else says it, it kind of becomes, it's all right, but it shouldn't be all right. But do you have any organization or group that you think is helpful?
I think that the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, they've put out some good materials over the years. I think that Teaching for Justice, now that's a very educationally based organization, but they put out a lot of good resources to help people understand hateful comments and where they come from and why not to use them. So those are 2 that I definitely fall back on.
Julia, it's been wonderful to have you here and to listen to your story and listen to the work that you've done. I know I'm getting some messages here from the control room, and I just want to mention that we want to thank Duval's Pharmacy and John Duval for the support that they've given our program and the Whitman Freedom Team over the last couple of months. I know Tom is going to talk a little bit about what's happening this weekend.
Yes.
Right? Whitman Day. Hopefully it won't rain on Whitman Day. And I'll leave it up to you, and you can say goodbye to our illustrious guest here.
Well, I've been stuttering through the whole thing, so let's try it. Basically,
I've been coughing through the whole thing. So
on Saturday, a group of people from the Whitman Freedom Team are going to be helping the Whitman Day forces to organize things, show people where to park, help people who are maybe having trouble with navigating and road work and so forth, where the parking be. We also have our own table, which will be under the tent, and it'll feature a pamphlet that talks about with the Whitman Freedom Team. We'll have flyers that we have there that will, again, show people where they can go for information. We'll have a little small American flags that people can get. Hopefully the children would like that. And you've been kind enough to get lollipops that are of the rainbow. Which
Rainbow, yeah. This is Pride Month.
This is Pride Month.
Yeah.
So we're going to be there from 10 to the end.
4 o'clock.
Yeah, 4 o'clock down in the park, rain or shine. And
It won't rain.
all right. So,
Never rain on our parade, so.
Yeah.
So.
Julia, I want to thank you. I know we didn't give you much time, but you were great. You were great, and I learned quite a bit in just a little while.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on, and I so appreciate everything you're doing with the Whitman Freedom Team.
Well,
it's so
thank
important.
you.
And
Yeah,
I
thank you.
appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, with that, I just want to say that please take a look at this program and others in our series. It's not only on the local Whitman cable channel, but also on YouTube as well. Under the Whitman Freedom Team, last month we had a show on mental health, of which we, I think, got a good number of positive response. I'm sure we'll get some great positive response from Julia's comments and her insight today as well. So with that in mind, this is Mike Kryzanek speaking for Tom Evans, and of course our special guest Julia Sheehan, saying good afternoon, good night, and we'll see you soon with another program here on Whitman Cable for the Whitman Freedom Team.